So with that, it's time to begin the first talk today. Our first speaker is Sumana Annagiri. She is at the Department of Biological Sciences at ISER, the Indian Institute for Science Education and Research at Kolkata. She did her undergraduate and master's studies in Mysore, and then after a brief postgraduate stay in Delhi, she came back to Bangalore IISc to do her doctoral studies. Her research interests are biology, of course, biology, ecology, evolution, and for her PhD work, she studied wasps. And for the last several years, while at ISER, she and her team members have been researching ants, the behavior of ants, how they evolve, and the ecology and the evolution of ant colonies. So if you thought that moving homes is a challenge, Sumana is here to tell us how challenging it is for ants.
It's a great pleasure to be here and share my excitement about studying ants with all of you. In today's evening's talk, I will be introducing the challenges of relocation, how to move from one house to another that these ants will be facing. And in order to do that, my plan of action is the following. In the beginning, I'll first tell you why we are so interested in looking at ants. Then, I will be addressing some of the common myths that people have about ants and telling you what exactly is happening, show you what is home and what is relocation for these ants, and the different challenges that they will be facing using the experiments that we have conducted in our laboratory, and the answers to that will emerge while you understand these experiments. So first of all, let me start by saying, why do we look at ants, right? It is an organism that's very much present in our houses, and we really almost all the time ignore them. If not, try and get rid of them. Yeah, so why pay attention to ants? Why are we going to focus on ants? This is something that I would like to start with. There are several organisms in this planet. Even though they have a tinge of red in the screen, now they're far better. They look more like what they're supposed to be looking. Several wonderful organisms in this planet. And each of these organisms can be studied at the level of the organism itself, or we can look at it lower levels like the cell or the molecules that are present in these organisms, or we can go ahead and see what are the populations, what is the ecosystem in which they live. So there's a vast spectrum of living organisms that one can pay attention to. So why are we going to look at ants? That will be the first part of what I will be introducing you to. In the middle of this, I will also give you some busters about general information that we have of ants. So most people in the audience will believe and will have unique name in their own languages, one for the black ant and another for a red ant. And like most of you would believe, red ants are the ones that would bite you. It is harmful to be touching these individuals, whereas black ants are much more docile, they will not harm you. And then the impression is that there are only two kinds of ants, black and white, and red. Of course, that is not the scenario. There are a large number of ants. About 12,000 species of ants populate this world. And the number of ant species in this world is in fact higher than the number of mammals that are present in this world or the number of birds that occupy this planet. So, large number of species of ants. Yes, they are black, they are red, and many shades of brown and green in between, but it is not like there are just two types of ants. There are 12,000 species at least in this world. They are present pretty much everywhere in the world. If you see the red components of this map, you will find that they're present everywhere except in the polar areas where it is really, really cold and they don't occupy these parts. Now, like we all know, they're very, very common. You will see a large number of ants. So if you want to quantify the number of ants, that would be a bit of a task. So instead, what we do is we look at the weight, the carbon weight of organisms that are present in this planet. And if we were to look at the carbon weight of ants in whatever units, don't worry about the units, we find that ants have 12 units of carbon weight, whereas all the wild birds together in the entire world will constitute 2 units. Right? So compared to wild birds, there are a much, much larger number of ants, species, as well as in terms of weight. So the number of these creatures are enormous. They perform extremely important tasks in the ecosystem that we work with, and I will go to that in the next slide. The next myth that I want to talk to you about is that all ants make trails. The moment there's a bit of sugar on your kitchen counter, it will take about 10 minutes or 15 minutes before a trail of ants will go to collect this piece of sugar, right? This is a common sight. Whether it's in our garden or in the kitchen, there is a trail of ants which will march towards the food that they have discovered. But then the question is, do all ants make trails? And the answer to this is no, not all ants make trails. There are a large number of species of ants which do not make trails. They're not capable of doing this cooperative food, a sight which is very, very common to all of us. They do not manage to carry their food in this cooperative manner, but an individual ant will go forage, bring food, and get it back to its nest. So several hundred species of ants are incapable of making these trails and hence will forage on their own. They have very, very interesting roles in the ecosystem, like I mentioned to you. And for example, in the very first image A, you will see those ants are having sugar from extra floral sources. Why? Because they are the protectors of the plant. The plant, as a reward, will give them extra sugar in those sugar wells, if you see. They are seed dispensers. If this ant does not remove the yellow tip on that seed, the seed will not germinate. And only ants can do this. All right? And then, of course, they are the number one scavengers of other insects. In that particular slide, you can see a honeybee is being transported, a dead honeybee is being transported back to its nest. Then, in addition to these things, which you may know already, what I would like to introduce to you are ants are also herders. They have their own cattle with them. The green bugs that you see in this D panel are aphids. These produce sugar solution to them. The ants will feed on the sugar solution, and at the end of the day, this herd of cattle, the green beetles, are taken back to the nest. Next day morning, they're brought out to graze again, such that the ants can drink the sugary solution that the aphid will produce, exactly like the cows and goats that human societies keep. In addition, ants are also farmers. This is a fungus garden that these ants have made. And how is this garden created? By several thousands of ants collecting bits and pieces of leaf, chewing it in their mouth, and putting it down on a substrate such that fungus will grow on it. And please note that these worker ants are only capable of eating the spores produced by this fungus. They do not eat any other kind of food, right? So this is a classic farmer system, the agricultural system that humans also follow. Ants do it with fungi. So they have fantastic societies in which they live. There is a queen ant, the biggest individual that you see here with wings. There is a male ant on her left-hand side, and there are worker ants. So there are tens and thousands of worker ants within a colony, but these are all sterile. Only the queen is the one that reproduces. Further, the workers are not morphologically identical in all the species. There are different castes among the workers. So there is very clear division of labor. There are some individuals with very big mouth parts as working as soldiers, and the very first individual here is a worker who is a soldier. She is in charge of the defense of the colony, whereas the smaller ones are in charge of taking care of the brood, the developing ants within the nest. So they show a clear caste system among the workers. So based on this, we see a very high diversity. We see that they're distributed all across the globe. They are ecosystem engineers because they play very vital roles in the ecosystem they live in, highly abundant. And fossil records tell us that they're at least 120 million years old. They've been on this planet for 120 million years. So based on all these reasons, given that we are ourselves a very curious species, in today evening I want to convince you that there are many things that we as humans can learn and understand from these ancient societies. All right? So that is why we should be looking at ants. What ants? Only one species called Diacoma indicum. This is what it looks like. It is present in all those green parts within our country and nowhere else in the world. They form very small colonies, about 60 to 80 ants within the nest. This is what the ant looks like. It's about a centimeter in length, and all of them look identical, but then you cannot ask questions and answer them if they are looking identical. So the first thing we do when ants come to our laboratory is to mark every individual with paint. Doing this, we give them a name. So the first ant for here, for example, is blue dash dash, and hence we know exactly what her role is inside the colony. So we observe what blue dash dash does as compared to a different ant which is white dash dash within the nest. Right? So now we can have individual records of the activity of all of these ants within the nest. So I work in ISER, Calcutta. This is the geographical location, and our field site is like this. So we spend a lot of time walking around here, looking for ants, and trying to understand the behavior that these ants perform. So what is a home for these ants? And in general, what is a home for an organism? It's a place to rest, to raise the young ones, to place the food resources that they may have collected, and it's also a place to get away from predators and parasites. This is a lovely home built by this dollar bird, right, in the bark of a tree. But what about our ants? How do they make their nests? What does it look like? So it's simply a hole in the ground if you're just taking a walk in your garden. However, if you want to see the architecture of these homes, we went ahead and tried to quantify this architecture. And to do that, we melt aluminum and pour it in this hole, which is the entrance hole. So the aluminum will go into all the crevices that the ants have made for their home and solidify into a three-dimensional structure. We get this structure out of the soil and quantify what is their nest like. So this is what a nest looks like. There's an entrance, a tunnel, and a single chamber. So I like to call this as a studio apartment. There's simply one chamber. All right, all the activities of the ant has to be conducted within that particular chamber. All right, so in the studio apartment is where they live, but occasionally they would have to go from one nest into another nest. Right? This is an activity that all humans, not all, many humans would be performing, and I have not yet found an individual who said they enjoyed relocating their house. This is an extremely stressful activity, and not many of people are there who would say that they enjoy relocation. So this is what happens. Living rooms become like this, a bunch of whole packaged material loaded onto trucks and taken in human cases. So what about the ants? How do they manage to do this, and why would they want to do it? The answer is when the nest is damaged, or if there's a lack of resources within the vicinity, or if there is high competition from neighbors, ants are known to pack up and go to a different place. All right? So presumably when you're living one house and going to a different house, humans will certainly not forget their children. Yes, we will obviously carry our offspring, but what about other organisms? Are they capable of carrying their offspring from one location to another? Right? The answer is no. Several organisms cannot. So please think of a bird which has built a nest and it has laid its egg. And if it has to relocate, there is no way that it can transport its egg. Right? So in this manner, several organisms will lose their offspring if they have to relocate. However, we want to see what happens in ants, right? And the answer to that, this is an exception, a gharial, when one of the pools in which its babies are present is drying out, then it loads all its offspring on its back swims along, walks to a different place and releases them in a different pond. Okay? But this is an exception. In many cases, the offspring in fact die if the nest is not in good shape. So, first of all, we will pay attention to moving the young or the offspring. How do ants do this? And as you can all imagine, traveling the same distance but with luggage which is fragile in the form of babies is much harder than just taking yourself to a different place, right? So we want to understand how do the ants manage this job. So what are the young ones? What are the babies in the ant colony? It consists of this egg, larva, which will metamorphosize into this pupa, and the pupa will give rise to an adult offspring. So as you can imagine, the pupa is the most invested item, whereas the egg is the most fragile item. The larva is also extremely fragile. So what we do is we ask, how do these ants relocate? I mentioned in an earlier video that not all ants make trails. So Diacoma indicum, the species that I am talking about, does not make a trail, but this is the manner in which they would relocate. They perform a behavior called tandem running. There are two ants here, orange, orange, yellow in front. She is the leader. She knows where the new nest is. And she is taking one follower at a time in physical contact with her to the new nest. They walk in physical contact throughout, drop the follower, come back, take the second individual, go and drop her again, come back. Okay? They can't make a trail. Hence, they resort to what we call as tandem running. White dash orange is the leader, blue dash blue is the follower, and she is being taken to the new nest to be dropped there and come back again. Alright? So this is the process of tandem running, and this is what Diacoma indicum uses to do so. Now, we were talking about the young ones, and we quantified this behavior and saw that the majority of the offspring is carried by the follower in this drawing that I have shown you. Right? The follower in its mouth will simply hold the brood and lift it and take it and go while tandem running to the nest, instead of leaders making back and forth trips. Alright? So, we asked, how is it that they manage to move such a large number of brood? How is this integrated into that entire system? And for that, we did this experiment. In the first case, the colonies were undisturbed. Whatever brood was there, and they had to move it. In the second case, which we call as B- experiments, we removed all the brood. And our hypothesis was, if there is no brood, the process has to be easier, and hence it has to be faster. Correct? I hope you understand, and that we expect that to be faster. Whereas if I give it extra brood, then we should assume that this process is more complicated and hence will take more time. Alright? I will not go into the details of what is the statistics we do in order to do it, but nevertheless, we found out that having extra brood reduces the chances that they relocate at all. But if they do relocate, then the time taken for relocation is exactly the same as B- colonies or control colonies. Alright? So which tells us that the moving of the brood has been so integrated into the system that it makes no difference for the ant colonies whether they have a brood or not. They are equally efficient in transporting their offspring. Moving on, we gave another problem to these ants. Alright? And in this problem, it is not like doing an equation or solving algebra. The problem was how to move a very large item through a small space. Right? So, while you are relocating, I am sure you had an almirah or a bed which cannot move through the door. Right? This is the exact problem that we posed to the ants. And I would like to show you this video which will tell you how to translate this into the ants. The follower is holding a pupa. It cannot go through the entrance. She came back. There's another one who invites her to go in. She readjusts the pupa, and there she gets into the nest. All right? So this is problem solving for the ants. And capitalizing on this from the natural habitat, we designed experiments where there's an entrance over here, which is the size that is found normally in nature. but we artificially made a very small entrance hole like this. And into this hole, the pupa can just go in, but an ant holding a pupa cannot enter. And we asked, can ants solve this problem? All right? And what did we find? We found that if the video can play, first of all, that this was a huge problem for the ants. They took much longer to solve this challenge. And if this needs me to press here to play. So initially, they're not able to inject this pupa in. Now she injects it in. And see what happens in the bottom of the nest. Yes, so there's another individual who is pulling the pupa from the bottom. All right? So when such a challenge comes up, the ants have a cooperative, emergent cooperative phenomena where one is helping push it, the other is helping pull it. And this never happens in a normal situation. So this is the manner by which they solve this challenge that we pose to them with very narrow entrances. There is one ant which is pushing it through and the other one which is pulling it into their nest. We continued to do this and we made them do a lot of trials and found out that even though ants have never done it, with more and more experience, they become better and better with time. Right? They're getting faster. They're learning how to do this faster and faster with time. And these are my students who did the experiments. And in every slide, that is what I will mention. The actual students who have put a huge amount of time and effort and interest in solving this and their pictures. So let me get into the next aspect, which is stealing neighbors. Right? When you are busy relocating, can somebody else take advantage of you? And the answer to that is this. Pay attention to the ant that came in now. Green, blue, green. She sneaks into a different nest. This is not her nest, but a neighbor's nest. She picks up the pupa, and there she goes. All right? So she is a thief. And she is collecting items from the neighbors who are relocating. Right? This is one colony, and she is from a different colony. And what does she collect? She collects pupa. Right? We saw 15 such items being stolen across several replicates that we did. 14 of them were pupa. All right? Remember, pupa is the most invested item in this colony. So the most expensive one is what they will take away. 2% of the colony on average become thieves, and 75% of the attempts that they do are successful. In the remaining time, what happens? They get detected and get beaten up by the host colony members. All right? So 75% of the time, however, they are successful. We could test this both in the laboratory conditions as well as in the natural habitat of the ants. Right? And in the natural habitat, we found that 37% of the colony on average, the pupa is getting lost. Right? So this is a huge investment loss for whoever is relocating. 37% of their investment is gone, right? As the pupa is going away. And the next question is, what happens to these pupa? Right? It turns out that they are taken to a different nest and reared there as slaves. So the rest of their lifetime, these pupa will eclose and work as slaves for that other system. The last question that I want to introduce to you all today is, remember, they don't make trails. Then the question is, can they find the shortest route from place A to B? All right? So how do they go about doing it? And in fact, how do we figure out that they know the shortest route or not? So for that, we take a colony, mark all of them, and release them in an unknown territory, a territory where these ants have never seen before, so about 5-6 kilometers away. And when we release it, we trace the path of every single ant in the natural habitat. And the lines that you see over there is the journey made by individual tandem leaders. Okay? This other end is where the new nest is. And what you can see over here, is the path efficiency was 75% to 87%. If it is 100, that means they're going like a straight line to the destination. But the ants are doing pretty well in completely unknown territory, even without a trail, right? And they're doing 75 to 87% efficiency. This is the path efficiency with which they go. And like you can see, individual leaders on their own are the least efficient when they're coming back. So returning leaders are wandering around, whereas animals with the brood, who is holding brood in their mandibles, or tandem running leaders, like I showed you in the video, are quite efficient and about 85% or so efficient. We think the returning leaders are wandering around so that they can find lost animals, if at all anybody is lost in their vicinity. All right, that is why we think they're wandering. So tandem leaders are particularly efficient even in heterogeneous terrains. So please remember, it's a 1 centimeter ant, and every blade of glass is a huge obstacle for these animals. Despite that, they're showing about 85% efficiency on average in navigating in fields which are completely unknown to them. Now we translated this experiment back into the laboratory and gave them a very clear path to go. In the first panel, you can see there is one long path. It's 120 centimeters long, and then there's a short path which is only 60 centimeters. And asked whether ants will be able to assess this difference and go on the short path. And the answer to that is in this bottom panel. Ants are mostly taking the short path, as you can see. Very few of them are traveling on the long path. So they clearly can understand that. But then you can tell me, hey, that is fine, that's very good. However, there may be a left or a right turn bias. Right? By chance, if they're going only there on a right turn from their nest, they will end up on the short path. That is why maybe you got the results. So we complicated the life of the ants a little more and built this second setup, which is consisting of various bridges, which has equal number of left and right turns. And even on this complicated path, we find that ants take the shortest route possible, right? So clearly, ants are capable of optimizing their path and finding the shortest route, even though their brain size is less than 1 millimeter, all right? And there is no information on the path. So tandem readers indeed are capable of minimizing their path. Now, we take a step back, and I want to summarize the discoveries that I, with my students, have made. And these are things that we are telling for the first time in the entire world about this one little species, a 1 centimeter black ant that is very much found right here in our backyard. The cost of moving is minimal. The entire colony has integrated moving the brood together with the adults. All right? There are stealing neighbors. About 30% of all the investment can get lost if you are relocating. And loss of the pupa is the major thing. And for the first time ever, we discovered that this happens in the tropics. It was recorded before in the temperate areas of the world, but not in the tropics. When we challenge ants with how to insert a pupa in a very narrow entrance, and remember, the pupa cannot be dismembered, made fragmented, made it into pieces and taken inside, right? Because then the pupa dies. So it has to be taken intact. This was the challenge. Ants were very capable of solving this by an emergent phenomena that we call as cooperative transport, and this becomes better and better with more experience. The ants are able to figure this out and do it faster. These ants are also capable of finding the shortest path from their old nest to the new nest and navigate to this in a very efficient manner. So in our lab, we use this paradigm of relocation, going from one nest into another nest, and look at various different factors like the traffic rules when they're tandem running. How do they navigate? How do they solve problems? What is collective decision making? How does this apply to this bunch of 100 ants? How is the work of relocation organized? What is the memory of the leaders? Can we knock the memory off of the leaders? Right? Can we do experiments to look at the communication between the tandem leader and her follower? What are the signals that these are using to communicate and be a cohesive whole? Right? These are the kinds of things that we continue to work on in these ants. And I would like to leave you with this words said by E.O. Wilson, possibly one person who has studied the ants the most in the entire world. He said, each species is a masterpiece, right? And I would like to add that understanding the life and challenges of these organisms with whom we share our planet is very important and is in fact an extremely nice experiment for ourselves, filled with curiosity and excellent answers. So, thank you very much for your time and attention. These are my students who have done all the hard work and of course the funding. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer if the time permits.
So the first question was sent in by Murli. In tandem walking, how does the follower ant or perhaps the leader, how does the leader find its way back to the original colony if they don't lay trails?
Yes. So individual leaders will navigate with whatever cognitive capacities they have. So we think that it is a combination of their visual senses, their olfactory sense, that is the sense of smell, as well as path integration. So ants are known to calculate how many steps they are taking and in what direction they are going. So when they have to come back, they seem to formulate what exactly did I go and now what is my homing direction, and following that they will come back. So this is what leaders would use to come back.
Right. Yeah, thank you. So this I think also answers a question which was raised by Subham a little later. There's a question by Shubhashri which is not so much about the science itself, but so you said that ants have castes depending on their morphology, division of labor and so on. The word caste itself has sociological implications well beyond this. So is there any movement in the scientific community to maybe rename this property to more scientific temper?
Yes, yes. So there are anthropomorphic implications of the term caste. In this particular case, the ants that eclose from the pupa who are born are already pre-born into one of the castes. So the soldiers cannot become workers and the other way around. So please remember, this society has been there for much, much longer. If human societies are there for 2.5 million years, this is 150 million years old. And in these societies, we form morphological differentiation among the workers, right? The popular term used to be caste, but now we say there is morphological differentiation among the workers, right? There is reproductive differentiation. The queens and the males are different, but so are the workers. So morphological differentiation is the answer.
Right. So in fact, that feeds directly into the next question, which is again by from Shubham. If the morphology of worker ants differs, how can they be identified as belonging to the same colony, to the same species perhaps?
Okay. So the sense of colony is dictated by the sense of smell for ants. If you have seen these ants, they mostly live in subterranean nests, that is below the ground nests. There is almost no sunlight that gets inside their nest. It is a dark chamber. So vision is not of any great importance. What is important, the most important thing is sense of smell. Ants can smell using their antenna, which is on their heads, and every colony has a distinct smell. So that is why all our ants, when they're going even on a trail, will touch each other, tap each other with their antenna, and then they will proceed if they're of the same colony. But when they tap each other and find that it's a different smell, a different colony ant, then there will be aggression, right? So sense of smell is what tells them that it is their colony.
Okay. Thank you very much. Maybe one last very brief question I can try. Well, maybe the answer won't be brief. I do not know who has raised this question. So in future, whoever is sending questions, please remember to mention your name if you send it by text. How do ant colonies manage rain inundation?
Correct. So monsoon and flooding is certainly a scenario. We have been studying this in the last 5 to 6 years, and we have many answers for what this is. If this person can talk to me later, I'm happy to explain given the time constraints. But monsoon is a certain difficulty that they face. On average, they will move to nests which are at higher elevations, right? How do they do this, and what are the other adaptations to this? I will be happy to talk. if you can meet me later.
Okay. Okay. So thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Sumana for this very interesting and insightful talk.